In many ways, it could be described as an autobiographical film, couldn't it? Could you say a little bit about that? Is it an autobiographical film for you?
Yes and no. First of all, the film is based on a novel by one of our most successful and intense German writers, Julia Franck. It's the story of her family. She left East Germany in 1978 with her mother and three sisters. So basically, many things in this film, in her book, are autobiographical. But for us, you know it, you probably don't. The script for this film was written by my mother, and there are many aspects of the story that have a very strong relationship with our family history. My father was 18 when he tried to escape from east to west. He didn't succeed. He went to prison for 1.5 years. He was planning a second attempt when he was 24. Then he met my mother, so he fell in love, and then he stayed in East Germany. But leaving the country, staying there, had always been an issue. And in the late 80s, my parents had an application, an official application for an exit permit that was accepted in the morning of 9th November 1989. So thinking or imagining a new life in this other side of the country was very present as well for me as a child. We moved to the West, even though the wall came down a few days after 9th November. We moved to Hanover. It's a city 350 kilometers away from Berlin, which is actually not a very far distance, but for us it felt like another continent. And we did speak the same language, and we looked in a way the same, but we felt like we had to, we are strangers. We have to learn how to walk from zero, or how to move, how to communicate. So the story that Julia invented in her novel was very close to me when I read her novel first.
So do you see your experiences reflected in the little boy to some extent?
Yeah, Alexei is 9 when he leaves the country. I was 11, and there's some, because we kind of moved away from the novel. Some of the scenes are exactly what I experienced, like the scene with this priest with his red, how do you say, neckerchief, or his experiences with other kids is what I experienced. And teachers, when I came to the new school, I mean, you have to imagine when you experience the late 80s in East Berlin as a child, you're not a child anymore. The autumn of '89 was so intense, and all the demonstrations, all the riots took place just underneath our balcony in Prenzlauer Berg in East Berlin. And so in a way, when you have to listen to your parents discussing the state of politics and the country every night, you stop being a child. And when we moved to West Germany, teachers couldn't really handle me. They were like, "This is not a child. What is this kid talking about? What is this kid asking? What kind of questions does he ask?" I suddenly started to defend the country. We just had left because there are so many cliches of life in East Germany and the West that didn't feel real for me or for my parents. So it was a very ambivalent time, and I think this is something that Alexei experiences as well.
Because it's an interesting aspect of the authenticity of this film that you encountered a novel where you saw experiences that you recognised, but you also wrote the script for the film together with your mother, Heide Schwochow.
Yeah.
So, but I understand you first came across the novel, it must be 10 or even 12 years ago now. Can you say a little bit about how the film developed from that experience of encountering the novel?
The novel was released in 2002 or 2003 when Julia was, I think, 30. I was a film student, first year of film school, and I read the novel because 2000, 2001, 2002 was the time when a generation of young East German poets and writers started to raise their voice and started to reflect their lives in the East and their parents' lives. And I read basically everything that was published. And but and I read her book, and I felt like this feels so strange and familiar at the same time. And I felt this has to be a film I want to make. But you know, as a student in first year, you have no idea how to get the rights for a book, and I basically had done 2 short films, so making a long feature film was very far away. And I did some research on the internet, and I found out, okay, there is a producer, and there is a television company, and there is a film distributor and the director, so they're making this film. And I was happy, and I was curious to see it a few years later. And then after 5 years, I made my graduation movie that also came to cinema, and also deals with the separation of the country. And I was asking myself, what happened to this novel? I never saw the film. And I did another research. There was no trace. And I sent a letter to the writer. What happened to your book? My name is Christian Schwochow. I'm interested in making a film if the rights are available again. And then we met, and it's true, they tried for 5-6 years to make a script, and I think it was 3 different directors and writers to make it happen. And filmmaking and especially screenwriting is a very, very complicated process, and the producers were actually quite happy to meet me as a young director and to get to know my mother, and we started from zero. And for us it also took 4 years before we started shooting.
And did you also work with Julia Franck on the script for the film? Was she involved?
No, we would always show her drafts, and I would always meet her because she lived in this camp for almost a year. And because she wrote the novel, all her memories were very precise and were thought through again and again. So she was my most important interview partner for my research. Of course, I met other people, many other people who went through camps like this, because in the between 45, actually 49, when Germany was separated, until 89, there existed more than 100 camps like this, and 5 million people went through camps like this. But we didn't want her to be involved in the creative process, and she didn't want either, because this is something very complicated. When you have a novel, a very strong novel, you still have to find your own story in it, and you have to achieve a freedom in using the material.
I mean, for those of you who don't know, she is a very famous novelist, and if you look online, you'll discover that the recently released English translation of the novel, which in German is called Lagerfeuer, Campfire, translated by Anthea Bell now into English, has appeared in English translation both in an e-book and in a paperback, with the title West. So the title of the English translation comes from the film, which I think is very interesting. I noticed actually that in one interview you said you'd, while making the film, had hoped that she would like it. Have you actually been in contact with her since making it? Does she like it?
She actually plays a small part in the film.
She does, yes, I saw that. Yeah.
It's, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds. She is the French Secret Service agent. There's a very short sequence where Nellie is being interviewed by an English agent and then by a French agent. This is Julia Franck. So she was always very present while we were making the film, and she loves it, and she's very happy.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, she was very excited when it suddenly, because as a novelist, you sell the rights to a producer, and then you wait 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, nothing happens. 5 years, 6 years, nothing happens. I mean, things are happening, but you lose trust that the film will ever be there. And then we managed to make a film, and yeah, now she's very happy.
I'm not surprised. One of the things that is very interesting about this film for me is that many films on the subject of German division and above all reunification are well known here, of course. Goodbye Lenin, The Life of Others, and then much more recently Barbara. But what strikes me as fascinating and interesting about this film, not only the authenticity we've talked about, but the fact that it doesn't actually focus so much on German history, East and West. It looks very much at the issue of migration as a broader context that has relevance to us. Not so much on the historical and political specificity. Was that your intention in making this film, that it should be different to the ones that have been there before? Or was that something that came out of your experience in the novel?
I didn't want to make a typical historical film.
Right.
Because the history of Germany and the separation is very special. But the history of immigration is very present, and becomes more and more an issue we have to deal with every day, and we will have to deal with it more and more. So I didn't want to make this classical historical piece where we look back and reflect the past. So yeah, I mean, actually you gave the answer.
That's very bad. I shouldn't have done that.
No.
Sorry about that. That was not intentional. But it is interesting because from our perspective, we have this cliche that it's always got to be about the Germans have to remember what happened. And you've made a film, which really is an innovative thing to do, about somebody who needs to get rid of memories to some extent. It's a very different approach, isn't it, to the one that, say, we're used to. And I think that people in Germany are used to as well. Was that also part of it in your mind?
You know, we still, I mean, the reunification is 25 years ago, and we're still, in a way, a country. Today I wouldn't say we're still separate, but I wouldn't say that the reunification is completed nowadays. So we still struggle, we still don't know each other that well, we still don't ask enough questions, and I wanted to make a film that provokes a German audience, because usually films, also novels, they end with somebody escaping from East to West and starting a happy life, but it's just far more complicated. It's still today, I have so many friends who can't really deal with this new life that's actually not that new anymore, because, like I said, it's 25 years ago. We still have to adapt, and we still have to learn so many things. And watching all these films my colleagues have been doing for so many years, I felt there's some aspects missing.